Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel, The God Code Exposed. As children, we are told scary stories about ghosts to frighten us into behaving properly. Ghosts become synonymous with chains dragging metal moans in the dead of night. However, one particularly unnerving ghost story is what we'll be discussing today. A story of seeing the dead that I've been waiting for an opportunity to tell you all about. This is the story of seeing dead people who aren't supposed to be dead. Before we get into it though, drop a like on this video for good luck and subscribe for more content. Let's start off with number 10, Gone But Not Forgotten. Moving on, number 9, Twin Peaks Darien. The first story comes from Reddit user Abominable Snowman, who posted in the r/paranormal subreddit. They say, "My wife and I were watching TV and drinking wine late one night. Suddenly she says, 'Do you see that?' I asked her to elaborate. She pointed to the window behind me. I turned my head slowly and saw the most realistic, dreamlike vision of my great-grandfather. He was wearing the same clothes he was buried in, right down to his dress shoes. He stood there for about 30 seconds looking at us, and then he walked through the window and disappeared." They go on to tell a bit more of their story. "My great-grandfather died 16 years ago of cancer. I was only 7 when he passed, so I have few memories of him. He was a heavy smoker and a heavy drinker. And if he wasn't busy beating my grandfather or wife, he was out looking for his next drink or cigarette. He was not a good person by any means. When I learned of his death, I was actually relieved. The last time I had seen him, he had come up to me while I was playing video games and tried to grope me. My mom stopped him and yelled at him, but he didn't seem to care, so yeah, not really a loss. Anyway, I told my wife to forget about it, but she has not let it go. She wants to move out of our home because she believes he is haunting us. What do you think happened here? Let me know your theories below. No. 8. Stairmaster. Next, we have a terrifying tale from a certain Jacob, who posted his story in the Love and Paranormal subreddit. He said, "I was working overnight security at a college campus, and I was driving around the campus to check everything was okay. It was about 3 a.m. I drove past the residence halls and then I turned around to drive back to the entrance of the campus. I noticed a girl sitting on the steps of one of the buildings. I figured she must have been kicked out of her dorm for partying too much. I kept driving, thinking that I would call campus police later if she was still there. As I reached the front entrance, I slowed down and turned toward the security booth. I could just barely make out the shape of a person sitting on the stairs, but I assumed it was the same girl. I waved to the other officer so that I could let him know that there was a girl sitting on the stairs. He responded by waving me off and telling me to forget about it. I nodded and continued on my way. About 20 minutes later, I started to make my rounds again, passing by the same residence hall. As I approached, I could see the silhouette of a girl on the stairs once more. I pulled over and got out to speak to her. I found her sitting on the same step where I had seen her before, except now she was surrounded by a crowd of students. I asked her if she was okay, and she responded, "I'm fine." Then she looked at the crowd of students and they all vanished. She was sitting on these stairs completely alone. I don't remember what I said after that. All I remember is staring at her in shock. I asked her why she was sitting there, and she simply said that she didn't belong there and that she needed to get away from all of them. She stood up and brushed herself off, and then she smiled at me. That's when I noticed that she was wearing vintage clothing, probably from the 1940s. She wore a long white dress that was slightly transparent, and her hair was in an old-fashioned style. Her smile grew wider, and she extended her arm to me. I could see that her fingers were skeletal and she was missing part of her left hand. I stepped back in horror, and that's when I noticed the crowd of students again. This time I could hear what they were saying. They were laughing at her and calling her names. I felt a hand on my shoulder and turned to see the same security guard who had waved me off earlier. He looked at the girl and then back at me and mouthed the words, "Campus Police." I ran over to my car and called them. When I returned, the girl was gone and the students were gone. I checked the attendance records for the school and no one was even living in those dorms yet. Also, when I checked the police reports, there was nothing about a missing girl. Creepy stuff. Let me know your thoughts on this one in the comments below. Number 7. Not Supposed to Be Dead. Another Reddit user, Sandwiched Penguin, shared a story of a ghostly encounter that they had while visiting London. "It was my first time in London. I was walking around taking pictures of the beautiful architecture, and just soaking up the atmosphere. I wanted to take a picture of this massive church. It was so old and huge. I began taking pictures, but I couldn't get close enough because of all the people. There were hundreds of people in line to get into this church. I thought I'd go inside and take a picture from the balcony, so I got in line. But after about half an hour, the doors opened and someone exited. I was the next in line. I went inside, and the woman in front of me noticed that I was holding a camera and said, "You can't use flash photography in here, love. And don't take pictures of the man in the corner, love. He doesn't like it." I assured her I wouldn't take any pictures of anyone. I politely thanked her for the warning and entered the church. I turned around to thank the woman again, but she was nowhere to be seen. I walked up to the balcony and took a couple of pictures. A little girl came up beside me and asked me why I was taking pictures of her father. I looked over my shoulder and realized I had been taking pictures of a statue, a man standing in the corner. The girl explained that her father was in a wheelchair and was paralyzed from the neck down, and that he enjoyed listening to people talking about their cameras and taking pictures. So she often brought him to this church so he could listen to people chatting about their cameras. I apologized and we chatted for a few moments before she went off to join some friends. I finished taking my pictures and was about to leave when a woman's voice said, "Love, don't forget your camera." I turned and saw the woman who had warned me about taking pictures of the man in the corner. She was smiling and winking at me. I laughed and replied, "Thank you, you too, love." I picked up my camera and headed for the door, glancing back at the man in the corner. As I did, I caught sight of a woman in a wheelchair, also winking at me. No. 6. Graduation Day. Next we have a Reddit post from user Manda Panda. They said, "One day while I was home for college, I was hanging out with my grandparents, brother and sister. We were sharing stories and having fun. Then my grandmother suddenly stopped, stared straight ahead and said, 'Well, I guess I'll be seeing you guys soon.' Confused, I asked her what she meant. She still hadn't taken her eyes off the blank wall. 'I just saw my friend Betty. She told me she's coming to visit soon.' My grandma always used to tell us stories about her friend Betty, who she hadn't seen in decades. She told us how Betty had been her best friend since childhood. They had grown apart after high school, and she had no idea where Betty lived or if she was still alive. She would occasionally mention Betty in a passing comment, but it had been years since she'd mentioned her in detail. After she'd spoken to Betty, she became very quiet and we changed the subject. About a month later, my grandmother passed away. She passed peacefully in her sleep while she was visiting us. We were grateful she was able to spend her last days surrounded by the family she loved. Now, this may just be a coincidence, but the fact that she predicted her own death almost perfectly creeps me out. No. 5. Dinner guest. Moving on, we have a story from a certain Angela. She said, "We were eating dinner one night when my son, who was 8 at the time, announced, 'Oh, look, Grandma, Maria is here.' We turned to look, but no one was there. His grandmother had passed away a year prior. My husband and I exchanged nervous glances, and I asked, 'Who's Maria?' He replied, 'Grandma's sister. Why can't I hug her?' I tried to change the subject, but he insisted on going to greet Maria. I stopped him and told him that Maria had passed away years ago. He looked genuinely surprised by this news and said, 'No, she was just here,' and she was smiling at me. I hugged him tightly and asked him if he wanted to finish his dinner. He agreed and ate without another word. Later that week, his aunt, who had passed away 2 months prior, appeared to him in a dream and told him that she was proud of him. Since then, he has seen several other relatives who have passed away. I'm not sure if this is a gift or a curse, but it's definitely eerie when they appear so realistically. Number 4, ghostly appearance. Next, we have a story from a certain Beth. She said, "I was getting dressed to go out, and suddenly I saw the ghost of my cousin who had passed away 3 years prior. She was wearing the exact outfit she had been buried in. She stood at the end of my bed, smiling and waving at me. I was petrified. I sat down on the bed and the ghost came closer and put her hand on mine. She told me that she was happy and for me not to worry. Then she vanished. I'm not sure why she visited me, but I feel she wanted me to know that she's at peace." Number 3, the woman in white. Next, we have a story from a certain lady. She said, Many years ago, I was traveling from Ireland to England with a friend. On the ferry crossing, we met an elderly couple who invited us to share a table with them. We accepted, and they bought us a drink. During the journey, we discovered we had a lot in common, and we all became friends. Near the end of the trip, they told us they lived in a coastal town and invited us to visit them. When we arrived, they showed us around their hometown, which was filled with shops, pubs, and B&Bs. Finally, it was time to go. We promised to keep in touch and parted ways. 2 days later, I received a phone call from my friend asking me to come to her house immediately. When I arrived, she burst into tears and told me that the elderly couple from the ferry had died in a car accident. She told me she had a strange feeling about their deaths. Even though they had been invited guests, we had never discussed personal details such as addresses or names. I couldn't understand how she could have known about the accident. Still, I knew she was right. I had a terrible feeling about their deaths too. Many months passed and my friend and I both moved on with our lives. One day my friend received a letter in the mail. It was addressed to both of us and contained 2 photos and a handwritten note. The photos were of the couple and the note read, "Here are some photos for you. We had such a wonderful time with you both. Thank you again for the lovely visit. We're so glad we met you. If you ever visit us again, we'll show you around some more. Love, Margaret and John." She had written the letter in such a shaky hand that we could barely decipher the words. The letter was postmarked the day after they had died. How do you think they knew something was wrong? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Number 2 Attic Encounter. Next, we have a story from a certain Moondust 123. They said, "I was unpacking boxes in my new apartment, and I heard footsteps above me. I thought nothing of it, and continued unpacking until I heard the footsteps again. They were slow and deliberate. I decided to investigate and climbed the attic stairs. I shone a flashlight around, but the only things up there were old furniture and cobwebs. I went back downstairs and resumed unpacking. About an hour later, I heard the footsteps again, and I climbed back up to the attic. Once again, I searched, but I saw nothing. To my surprise, the sound of footsteps followed me to the attic. I shouted, 'Hello,' as hoping to scare whatever was up there. A moment later, I heard a voice respond, 'Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you.' I gathered my courage and called out again. 'Who's there?' The voice replied, 'Just an old man.' Relieved it was just a person, I climbed back down the ladder and returned to my unpacking. The following day, I enlisted the help of a friend, and together we hauled the old furniture out of the attic. As we cleared away the debris, we discovered a loose floorboard. Beneath it was a small space just large enough to fit a person. It seemed like the perfect hiding spot for an old man. I called out to him, but there was no reply. I'll never forget the shivers down my spine when I realized the attic was empty. And finally, number 1, a mother's love. Last but not least, we have a story from a certain user. They said, "I was home for Christmas break, and my sister and I were helping our mother decorate the house. While searching for ornaments in an old photo album, I came across a picture of myself and my sister as children. We were standing beside our mother and her parents. The photo was taken shortly before my grandfather passed away. As I handed the photo to my sister, I noticed that our mother's face had been scratched out. Confused, I asked her why she had done that. She looked at me for a moment without responding. Then she quietly said, "Because he's dead." I was puzzled, so she explained that the photo was taken before my grandfather's death. I asked her why she had hidden his face if she knew he had passed. She replied, "He's not dead, he's right here." She placed her hand on my shoulder and smiled sadly. Then she went back to decorating the tree. I felt a chill down my spine, and I couldn't help but wonder if my grandfather's spirit was truly present. Perhaps he was watching over us from beyond the grave. Maybe my mother had simply scratched out his face to protect him from harm. Or maybe he had passed away, and she was in denial. I didn't push the issue further and instead joined her in decorating the tree. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Had my grandfather really passed away? Or was he still with us in spirit? I'll never know for sure, but the memory of that strange incident will forever be etched in my mind. Thanks for watching. Which story was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that like button for good luck and subscribe for more content. See you next time. Bye.